This is ABC Newcastle.
Have you ever given up something in an effort to be healthier? You might have given up smoking, you might have given up drinking, maybe you've taken up exercise.
The International Society for Physical Activity and Health has 8 things that it thinks can help make people move more. So what are they, and how are we doing in the Hunter when it comes to encouraging people to be physically active? Matthew Tepi Mclaughlin is from the International Society for Physical Activity and Health. He's also a PhD candidate at the School of Medicine and Public Health at the University of Newcastle. Good morning, Tepi.
Morning, Dan. Morning, Jenny.
What are the types of things the Society thinks will help get us moving more?
Yeah, I think if you ask anybody on the street what would get them moving more, you'd probably get a different answer to what I'm going to say, because I think we often think about physical activity as things like sport or perhaps going to the gym or running. But physical activity is a bit broader than that. It's the types of things that we do during our day. And actually, most of our physical activity is about things like getting from A to B and doing work-based activities. So ISPAH's 8 investments, the International Society for Physical Activity and Health, has provided global consensus on what works to increase our physical activity. And these 8 things span quite a few different things. So we've got one of them as school physical activity programs to help get our kids moving. Then we turn to the adults and we look at workplaces and how to get them moving whilst they're at work. If you've ever been to your GP and asked whether you've been asked how physically active you've been, that's one of the other investments to do with healthcare. Public education, so you may have seen campaigns in the past. One of them that's running in Australia is the Find Your 30 campaign, to find 30 minutes of activity. Sport and recreation, that's the obvious one, and I think Australia really prides itself on doing that sort of stuff well, and here in Newcastle as well, we really like our sport. And the last 2 are to do with transport and how we build our cities.
So when you look at your hometown, Newcastle, and your region, the Hunter, through that lens, how are we doing in controlling any of those elements that are within our control?
Yeah, we're doing well in some and less well in others. The ones we're doing well, it's actually Heart Week this week, Heart Foundation's campaign, and that's encouraging people to get a check with their GP around how their heart's going and what kind of risk factors they have for heart attacks and strokes. And one of the major risk factors is physical activity. So this is part of the healthcare investment from the International Society. And so we're doing really well with encouraging that, and we need to do more of that so that our GPs and our healthcare system builds physical activity into every appointment. One of the other things that we're looking at is in New South Wales is the Active Kids Voucher, which you may have seen. And recent works on that from colleagues down in Sydney has found that has been really beneficial, particularly for girls, actually, and also for Indigenous children. So that's a really fantastic scheme to reduce the cost of sport. So they're 2 things that we're doing really well. Less well, we're perhaps not focusing so much on our urban environment, how we're building Newcastle, how we're building New South Wales. And the types of things that influence our physical activity are things like road speeds, are things like pedestrian crossings, are things that we perhaps don't always think would encourage us to be physically active. But the more livable our environments are, the more likely we are to pop down to the shops while walking than we are while driving.
Tepi, the workplace interests me because most of us spend at least 8 hours, probably 5 days a week, in our workplace. What can workplaces do to make sure that we're more active? Because if you're racing home to kids and dinners and things like that, you're not going to do it after work. What can you do during work?
That's right. One of the things you can do, one practical thing, is to try and break up your sitting time every so often and just stretch your legs, go and get that coffee, take a walk around the block. I know it's difficult, but it can help to increase productivity. It can help to refocus your concentration. And some people might think, that's a really difficult habit to build. And that's because it is. And you do need a supportive workplace culture to get that. Some workplaces, for instance, if you're on a manual workplace site, that's slightly different. But if we're talking about offices and people that are in typically inactive jobs, just breaking up your sitting time every so often and trying to get a couple of minutes in here and there could be really helpful.
Interesting. Okay, something that our team might be able to take on board here. Not against the idea of the occasional coffee walk, our little team here.
The other thing is we love standing desks at the ABC. Jen and I stand for our show, and I move a bit.
Apart from Dan shifting foot to foot almost constantly, we don't move very much while we're standing.
Standing good though, Tepi?
If breaking up your sitting time is probably the most important thing and trying to weave in activity. We know that people's existing level of activity prevents about 4 million deaths worldwide, which is fantastic. But we know that, unfortunately, the equivalent of about 3 football stadiums per week of people die early each week because we're not getting physically active enough. So there's a lot of activity that's causing concern. And these investments, the 8 investments, are there to provide global consensus on what works, but also it applies locally to Newcastle and New South Wales as well.
Well, Tepi, I know we will have a chance to speak again soon on the areas you're really very, very passionate around, getting people moving more within the urban environment. We look forward to talking about that soon. Thank you for being here this morning.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Dan.
You. Tepi Mclaughlin from the International Society for Physical Activity and Health, also a PhD candidate at the University of Newcastle. Wonder if you will be able to work a bit of activity into your workplace today. If you're heading into an office right now, will you move around? If you're going into a school or so, and maybe you find yourself on playground duty, maybe you can get a walk in during a break or so on. But yeah, how do you do it? We'll have to make an effort today, Dan.
You're coming on the coffee walk.
It's not very